Hello, everyone. My name is Lionel Sander from Pembroke Publishers, and I'll be your host for this evening. Thanks for joining us for our session today for Better Teaching Communities. You'll see on the screen, sort of down the bottom, either beside me or to my right or left, our two presenters. The way that we'll work today is we'll do one presentation, and then we'll just do a quick switch to the second one. So we'll be starting with Amanda Ewell, and then after her presentation, we'll move over into Diane Vedder. So if you have any questions to either one of them during their sessions, please feel free just to drop a question into the chat. I'll be monitoring that chat, and then at the end of their presentation, I'll just take a couple minutes and try to bring as many questions as I can forward, and we'll have a conversation with each of the presenters and try to answer your questions as they arise. So with that, I think we'll get started. It is my pleasure to introduce Amanda Ewell. Amanda has extensive experience teaching both in public and private schools here in Canada, as well as in Japan, as she's been putting her teaching career together. She's a teacher of primary grades, music, physical education, dance, drama, and English as a second language, and she is passionate about reaching students in new and innovative ways. I've heard Amanda speak before, and I know that the new and innovative ways and the passion comes through in all her presentations. She's also an enthusiastic and international speaker. She has spoken in English, England, Japan, and Canada to young adults on issues such as identity, boundaries, and forgiveness. Amanda currently calls Toronto home, though I suspect there's been a few cities along in your career, where in Toronto she is rich in family, friends, and salsa dresses, which I suspect means there might be a salsa dance book in the future as well after this one. You never know. So Amanda, you never know. Thanks for taking the time to join us tonight, and I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you. So we're going to start with a little clip today, a video clip.
Your heart out, you crinkled, wrinkled, fat cat.
You're a very ill-mannered young man. Do you know that?
You're a slug-eating worm.
Come on, you can do better than that.
Can't believe you're encouraging me.
Yeah, show me your fastball, dust brain. You paunchy, sag-bottom, puke pot.
You are a very poor role model for these kids. Do you know that? I bet you don't even have a 4th grade reading level.
Hemorrhoidal suck navel.
Well, maybe a 5th grade reading level.
Boil dripping, beef fart sniffing, bubble butt.
Someone has a severe caca mouth. Do you know that?
You are a fart factory. Slug slimed sack of rat guts and cat vomit. Cheesy scab-hicked, pimple-squeezing finger bandage. A week-old maggot burger with everything on it and flies on the side.
Substitute chemistry teacher?
Come on, Ruth.
And there you have it. My chosen profession used as an insult. I mean, come on. It's not that bad. So I have chosen to be an occasional teacher. I was permanent and resigned from that because it suited my lifestyle more to be an occasional teacher. And I have a few other jobs that I do, including, of course, speaking and writing. And I really, really think that it is time to change the culture around occasional teaching. Like, right now, still occasional teaching is not seen as like a really great job. You hear it when people say, oh, they're only an occasional teacher or just a substitute teacher. You know, and I think, oh, we really we can change that, you know, because I have proof that actually we are very well respected. And this is it. When people come to school with their children and they see that it's an occasional teacher that day, they do not turn around and take their children home. They leave their children at school with us. You know, the thing that they love the most in life, they trust us with. In fact, we are respected, but it doesn't come across in culture. And I think that we can change that. And the first thing I think we can do to change that is we can start telling stories, the good stories about occasional teaching. Because, you know, sometimes people only hear the bad stories about the occasional teachers who yelled and, wouldn't let them go to the bathroom. I hear that one all the time. I'm like, who is it that's not letting kids go to the bathroom? So we need to tell the good stories, the ones where we come to a school and they say, Miss Ewell, whose class do you have today? And I tell them, they're like, oh, when are you going to come to my class? Right? We have to start telling the fun stories where the kids draw you pictures. Can I tell you, I love when the kids draw pictures of me. I look so good, especially when they draw those like anime manga pictures. I have great hair in those pictures. So, we need to start telling those stories more often when we're out with our friends, when we're talking with parents. We can start telling the good stories, right? We can start telling the stories where the kids are looking forward to seeing us. And then the second thing we can do is we can start speaking with respect about our own profession. And this is really easy to do when we understand just how many people wish they could have our job. It's a good job. A lot of people want to be a teacher and are unable to get in. A lot of people want to be a teacher and are unable to get a job with the boards, right? We're already doing so well to have this job. It's a good job, and we can start talking about it like that, And then the third thing I think we can do is we can have an answer ready for people when they speak of our job as not being that great a job. I don't mean we're going to be like rude or anything. I just mean that we can have a ready answer, where we can say, actually, I think it's a really great job. I really enjoy it. And that's really what my hope is. My hope is that I can help people really enjoy occasional teaching. A lot of times people sort of see occasional teaching as the thing they have to do before they become a real teacher. But I want to let you know that I love it, that there are many, many people who love occasional teaching. There are so many benefits to it, like not doing report cards and not doing report cards. That's just a really good one. I had to say it twice. So I think that in our generation of occasional teachers, we can change this. And I think we'd like to change it. So what we're going to do now is a poll. And this poll just finds out, have you ever been an occasional teacher? And what kind of occasional teacher are you? And I realize we have quite a few students online. I am so glad you're here, especially after the announcement from the government that you guys are going to be teaching soon. So I'm sorry I made this poll before the announcement. So please click other if you are a student, and we will know that probably most of the others are students who are here. I'm just going to give you a little bit of time to do that, and we'll come back and see what happened, how many people we have later. When we go into a school to do occasional teaching, the most important thing, or one of the most important things, is to get the students on our side in the first 10 minutes of the day, because that makes such a big difference. If we can just, like the students, they've had bad experiences and they're kind of worried, especially when they don't know us, when it's the first time they've met us, they're a bit worried. Like, what kind of occasional teacher are we? Are we the kind that yell and don't let them go to the bathroom? Or are we the kind that have fun and where they can relax, but we don't let the class get out of control, right? That's what we're aiming for, where we have a good day, the students have a good day, and the teacher hears about it. So in the first 10 minutes of class, I usually don't do attendance right away. I usually do it after I do my introduction, and I tell them right out, my name is Miss Ewell, and we're going to have a really good day. And I don't yell, and I tell funny stories and gross facts and ghost stories, and then I ask if they want to hear one. Because even sort of rambunctious classes will calm down for a ghost story. Now, there's lots of things you can do. Funny stories. I often tell the story of how when I lived in Japan, I called my boss Mr. Abe. I called him Mr. Abe by mistake, which means Mr. Shrimp. and he was kind of short. So, like the students, they just want to know about us, and they love hearing stories, especially if they think they won't have to do work because we're telling stories, right? So I'm going to tell my best ghost story, because even grade 8 students, they will sit down and they will listen so attentively for a ghost story. Now, I don't tell really scary ghost stories because I get nightmares, and I tell them that right out, because some of the students also aren't so great with scary things. But in really like sort of difficult classes, if I say I'm going to tell a ghost story, then they'll quiet down. So here it goes. This ghost story is true, and not like, oh, Bloody Mary is true. It really happened, and at the end you will know that it's true. So there was a family, a mom and dad, and they had a baby, and they wanted to move from their apartment to a house because they needed more room. And after they moved and got everything all set up, they wanted to go out and have dinner at a restaurant. But they didn't want to take the baby because then it wouldn't be a celebration. So they hired a babysitter, a high school girl down the street that was recommended to them. And she came, and all she had to do was listen to the baby monitor. And here I have to explain to them what a baby monitor is, because some of them don't have little brothers and sisters. And I explained that it's an old-fashioned kind of baby monitor, because nowadays the baby monitors have video, but this one only had audio. So, the one end is up in the nursery upstairs, and the other end is downstairs with the babysitter, and she can hear it. And after the parents left, she thought she heard the baby moving, and this baby hadn't learned how to roll over yet. So she went up the stairs, to take a picture of the baby rolling over, take a video. But by the time she got there, the baby had stopped moving. So she went back downstairs. And as soon as she got back downstairs, she heard the baby again over the baby monitor moving around. So she runs up the stairs. But by the time she got up there, the baby wasn't moving around. And she came back downstairs, and she's a little worried now. So she kind of turned up the baby monitor, and over the baby monitor came a man's voice whispering, "Come upstairs, the baby's sleeping." And so she freaked out, but she was very brave, and she didn't want the baby to get hurt, and she ran upstairs into the room. But there was nobody in the room. She picked up the baby, ran down the stairs, out the door, down the street to her parents' house, and called 911. So the police came, and they looked all over the house, but there was nobody there. And they asked her if maybe she had dreamed it, and she said no, but they thought that she really dreamed it. So when the parents came home, they told them that their house was safe. They had checked everywhere. Nobody was there. They said, okay, fine. So the next day, the husband was off to work, and the wife was home on maternity leave. And she was in the kitchen, washing out baby bottles. And over the baby monitor came the same man's voice whispering, "Come upstairs, the baby's sleeping." Now she freaked out, because now she knows there was a man in her house last night, and he's there now, and her baby's in trouble. And she ran upstairs ready to fight the guy. And then I asked the kids, whose mom would fight the guy? And they're like, oh, my mom would totally fight the guy. But there was nobody in the room. She picked up her baby, ran downstairs, got in her car, drove across town to her parents' house, calling 911. So now the police come and look everywhere. They're looking for, secret passageways and, but there's nobody in their house. And so the wife says to her husband, we're not living in a haunted house. And they spent that night at her parents' house. But of course, babies need a lot of stuff. And it was all back at their house. And so she sent her husband back to the haunted house to pick it all up. And he was in the kitchen, getting the baby bottles that she'd been washing. And nobody had turned off the baby monitor from the day before. But he was the only one in the house. And over the baby monitor came the same man's voice whispering, "Come upstairs, the baby's sleeping." And so, he got his baseball bat and went upstairs. And he looked everywhere. He looked places nobody else looked. He looked in the laundry hamper, inside the washing machine, inside the dryer. There was nobody in his house. He went back to the baby's room, and he looked all over the place, and there was nobody there. And over the baby monitor comes the same man's voice whispering, "Come upstairs, the baby's sleeping." And that time he thought he recognized the voice. And so he took the baby monitor and he went downstairs and out the door and next door, and he knocks on the next door neighbor's house, and the husband comes to the door and he says, Tim, do you have the same kind of baby monitor as this? And Tim's like, oh yeah, we use that exact same kind. He says, were you just asking your wife to come upstairs because the baby was sleeping? Tim's like, how did you know that? See, it wasn't a ghost. They could hear the next door neighbors talking to each other over the baby monitor. That's what happened. So when you finish that story, the kids will be like, tell another, tell another. And that's when I say, oh, well, if everyone finishes their math really quietly, I will tell another one at the end. So if you would like more ghost stories that are not too scary, I have a couple on my website, amandayuill.com, and you can just go look them up and tell them they're great. So that's one of the things that I do. Then after I sort of have the kids settled, what I do is I take attendance then. And often what I do is I say, put up your hand if you know someone who's not here, because that way nobody pretends to be somebody else, and I'm not saying their names wrong, right? Or sometimes I ask one of the girls in the front row, you know, the quiet ones that could lend you a pencil because the teacher locked her desk and didn't even leave you with a pencil to do attendance, you know? So that girl who lends me a pencil, I can always ask her, you know, who's not here today? Sometimes if it's a very quiet class, I can just learn their names right there, and that's great. But if it's a rambunctious class, I often don't do attendance the traditional way. Of course, we all have to find our own style. And I remember trying a few different things. Like one of the teachers I knew, he would tell the students they were going to start on something, and he would give them a full minute before he started to stop their conversations. And I tried it, and I discovered he was way more patient than I was. I cannot wait a whole minute. That's great patience. So it's good. It's good for us to try different things. So I want to encourage you, when you go into a class, try some fun things, try some stories, try a game, you know, get the kids on your side in the first 10 minutes. Okay, so I think we should be done the poll. So let's look at the poll and see what kind of substitute teachers have people been. Okay, so 32% have never been an occasional teacher. I was an occasional teacher and now I'm permanent, 4%. I'm an occasional teacher now looking for a permanent job, 7%. I'm a career occasional teacher, not looking for a permanent job. So that's what I am, a career occasional teacher. I'm a retired teacher who works as an occasional teacher, 1%. And then I would guess most of this is students, other, 41%. That's great. That's really, really great. There is lots of ways to be an occasional teacher. Okay, so lastly, I did want to go over some tips for online teaching, because of course all classes right now are online, and we can do occasional teaching for online teachers all this year. So what's the same between occasional teaching online and occasional teaching in real life? The first one is getting there early to organize. You know, when you go to a school, you have to get there early so you can find the door to go in, because the door with the buzzer isn't always the door on the street. And sometimes you're wandering around the school looking for the door with the buzzer to get in. I don't know if you've ever had that happen. Or Google Maps brings you to the back side of the field and not where the parking lot is, and you're driving around the block looking for the parking lot. So getting there early in real life is important. And then online, we're having to log into someone else's account. We're having to see, you know, do we have the lesson plans they left, and where is their homework? Is it on Google Classroom? Is it on Brightspace? Is it somewhere else, right? Or does our camera work? All that kind of thing. So getting there early is the same. And also getting the students on your side is the same, right? Where the first few minutes of the day, we want to do something to show them this is going to be a good day. And then also we're going to do our best to do the work that the teacher left, right? Because that's the number one complaint I hear from teachers, is that when an occasional teacher comes, they didn't do the work they left. Now, I have to admit, sometimes they leave work and they're like page 56 in the math textbook, and the math textbook only goes up to page 45, right? Like, you know, I have had that. And of course, you just do your best. But as much as possible, we're going to do the work that they left. And then what's different about classroom management online? Well, the first is the mute all button. Oh my goodness. I don't know how I'm going to go back to like regular classrooms without a mute all button. It's amazing. So in Google Classroom, in Brightspace, on Zoom, there's usually a mute all button. So when things are just getting a little bit, you know, they won the Kahoot game and they're all talking about what an awesome Kahoot game they just had, right? Like, we can press mute all and just sort of help them calm down. Also, sometimes if somebody's being rude, we can also press the mute button there. They can unmute themselves right away. So what I let them know is, I'm going to mute everyone. And if you need to say something, please put up your hand. And if you still speak out, especially if they're being rude or swearing, then I'm going to have to take you out of this meeting, because you can also kick people out of meetings, right? So if they're being rude, swearing, racial slurs, you've spoken with them a couple of times, it's not stopping, you can kick them out of the meeting. So I usually let them know, I'm going to mute. And then if you're not able to, gather yourself up and get yourself under control, I might have to ask you to leave or make you leave the meeting. Next, the chat button. If you're going into a new classroom and you don't know the students, I highly, highly recommend putting the chat to host only, where they can only chat with you, or turning the chat off, because things can get things can be going on in the chat and we're talking and not noticing it. And so I recommend leaving the chat off. And then the last thing there's lots of things, but the last major thing that's different is we won't know if they're there sometimes, especially like by grade 7 and 8, they don't turn on their video. And so I make sure the students know that I will take attendance at the beginning and the end of every period. And that I will be asking questions throughout the period to random people, and all they have to do is unmute themselves and say yes or no, or I don't know. But if I don't get a response any of those times, I'll mark them away for that period. Right? So we want to make sure that they're there and that they know we're going to be checking, and that we're going to do that every period so that they know. Although, like, if periods 1 and 2 are together, I do at the beginning of period 1 and the end of period 2. Next, Chrome extensions. There are some Chrome extensions for online teaching that you can have on your own computer when you're using Google Chrome that are amazing. The first one is Kami. Quite a few teachers use Kami. This is an extension that allows you to write on PDFs, so that when teachers give homework, the kids can just write it on the computer. They don't have to print it out and then hand it back in. Lots of teachers use Kami. So if you're going to be starting, I highly recommend just looking at it, making sure you know how to use it. The second extension I recommend is the paint tool, Chrome marker, and it allows you to write on any web page. So you can write on anything and the kids can see you circling things, and it's very, very useful. So I have some handouts for you guys today. It is in the book, Substitute Teaching. There are lesson plans and reproducible pages for kindergarten to grade 8. On my website, you can also get them, but there's no kindergarten ones on the website, so I wanted to give that to you here. Also on the website, there's no answer pages. The answer pages are in the book, though, so please do look through it. And also, I wanted to mention for the students, I have a couple of 2-hour sessions coming up. So if you join a Board of Education soon, then you can ask the Occasional Teachers Union when their training will be. So I think I have sessions coming up in Ottawa and Waterloo, and then probably Windsor and a couple more places. But even if I'm not speaking, they will definitely have training sessions, the Occasional Teachers Union. So please do make sure to get in touch with them. And if you have other questions, please email me. I'm more than happy to write back, and you can head over to my blog, and there's lots of information about occasional teaching there as well. So thanks so much, and Lionel, I'll give it back to you.
Thanks, Amanda. I would have checked on the poll that I was never an occasional teacher or substitute teacher or teacher on call or supply teacher, an LTO, whatever the label was. But I think as you can probably see from the poll, there are a lot of students in both of those, depending on which one they picked. And maybe there's a couple questions from the group, and then I just sort of have some thoughts as well there too. But in your talking and your experience, you clearly have this balance between experience learned and sort of experience says I need to be prepared for this. But this online world seems completely different. So Tiffany's asking, what happens when you remove a student from class? Do you let them log back in? Do you notify the admin? It's a lot different when it's go stand in the hall, right? I'll come out and talk to you, right? So how do you do? You may not have done that, but how would you deal with that?
Yeah, so when you sort of kick a student out of the class, it's usually set that they're not allowed to come back into that meeting.
Right.
So many teachers have like sort of a meeting before recess, a meeting after recess, a meeting after lunch, a meeting after afternoon recess. So in that case, they can come back in at the next meeting you start. So with Google Meets, with Zoom, that's all possible. So it's a setting. It depends on how the teacher has it set up. They should not be able to come back in, but if the teacher has their own setting, they may be able to. You definitely do let the teacher or the admin know that you've kicked someone out and why, because the only reason you're kicking them out is if they've been swearing or racial slurs or something that wouldn't be appropriate. Like if they were in a classroom, they would also be asked to leave the classroom for that. So in that's the case. Yeah.
It was interesting too, as you were talking about trying to find the front door and walking in. And while it's not that case for me anymore, when I first started teaching, being confused as a student and not even being allowed in because you look young, if you're at a high school, you've got all these challenges, which interestingly enough, when you do workshops for teachers, it's the same kind of issues. I'd never thought of that. But you need a login. How do I get to the email? How do I get to the teacher's notes? And Christine's kind of along that lines there. I think Christine mentioned before that she had been teaching, had children, raised a family, and then went back to occasional teacher. But in that time, you've got all these new learning management platforms, and where do you go for training? Where do you learn these things? Do you have any sort of thoughts on that as we move into this new world of online learning?
Yes. So if you're working with a board of education, they all have training. So I'm with the Toronto District School Board, and they have webinars that they have filmed and saved. And so you can go at any time and watch them, like the basic steps for this and that. If you're not with the Board of Education, YouTube is amazing. Like I can't tell you how much I've learned from YouTube, like really a lot this last year. And then the third place you can find answers is on Facebook. There are many, many, many virtual teachers groups on Facebook right now. You can probably find one for your board or your area, and those guys know everything. And when you're looking online for a question and it takes you like an hour to find that thing, but on the Facebook groups, if you ask it, people just put the answers in. So there's lots of places you can go right now.
And I would think too, the companies themselves, I know a couple of people that have worked on the education side of Brightspace, and they were always doing webinars. And so they're trying to get the word out as well. So, it's as crazy as it sounds, it's still new for most people. So it's not a problem to reach out, is it? So
yeah.
As we kind of come to the end, just a couple of things, and then I'll just let you have the last word and sort of final thoughts especially for new teachers, which I'm really excited are here today with us. Maybe a final thought for them, but for those of you up in the tab in the handouts, if you haven't found the handouts, Amanda has shared the kindergarten reproducibles there. There's also from Pembroke Publishers an offer that they're providing for everyone. If you would like to take a look at Amanda's book on substitute teaching, the code is the same as our hashtag for today. You can use that code and get $5 off in your purchase, and the link there will take you right to her book. So there were many late nights, I suspect, and nice days in the summer where you were working on that. So it's nice to acknowledge the effort that you put in there as well. But Amanda, I'll just sort of leave the last moment for you, a last word, and then we'll close it off from there.
Yeah. I was just thinking for the students, the first time you go in to substitute somewhere, do let them know it's your first day, because they will completely support you really well. I've seen many people come in out of Teachers College for the first day of vocational teaching, and people are excited for you and they're very helpful. And so on your first day, let them know, and you'll receive a lot more support.
And I think that's a really good comment across the board, especially for anyone coming new to the profession, is we've all been there,
Yeah.
and maybe not quite the occasional teaching, but we've all benefited from an occasional teacher. So ask. Everyone's there to help. And especially, like you said, first day, first week, first year, 5 years in, we're always asked. So that's great. Good. Well, thank you very much, Amanda. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today. So thank you. Okay, now it's my pleasure to start the second part of our webinar session today. And just before we do that, I did make a brief comment at the end of the last session. We do have a Twitter feed, so if you are a friend of Twitter, please, and see something that Diane's talking about, feel free to take a picture and tweet it out with the hashtag BTC21, and we will pick that up and be able to put it in our Twitter feed, which is at the top of the chat on the right there. So another way, if you'd like to interact and let folks know what you're thinking, we'd appreciate that as well. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our second presenter. Some of you, if you've been with us before, may have heard Diane's co-author present a different focus on the book back in, I believe, September. So, but it seemed appropriate that as we're talking about building teaching community and substitute teaching and a lot of first year and soon to be teachers, that, looking at mentoring and talking about, as Diane will, mentoring each other was an important piece to be talking about today. So it's my pleasure to introduce our author of the book, Mentoring Each Other, Diane Vetter. She's the course director for the Faculty of Education at York University. I'm not sure if we have anyone from York out there, but they might give a shout out in the chat if they are, Diane. Diane is an author of journal articles and a popular keynote speaker. Her research interests include mentoring, teacher education, and cross-curricular infusion of Indigenous perspectives, traditions, and cultures. She's taught at the elementary grades and has served as a teacher mentor as one aspect of a very extensive career. Diane is a bit north of Amanda, living in Barrie. And Diane, it's great to have you here this evening. And I'll pass the virtual mic over to you.
Thank you, Lionel. I appreciate the introduction. Just to give you a little bit more background about me, I began my career teaching in 1993 with the Canadian Forces Language School as a language teacher. I then moved into elementary teaching and finally into teacher education with the Faculty of Education, where it was my responsibility to not only mentor 1,500 teacher candidates every year, but to mentor their mentor teachers as well. So mentoring has always been something that's been near and dear to my heart. But mentoring not only in the formal way that you might think about it, but in mentoring each other. And I think today more than ever, we really need to mentor each other. And the last question that Amanda answered about, where do I get help, is very indicative of why mentoring is so important. Because teaching is a very complex profession. And now more than ever, with virtual and online teaching, with the different classrooms and the differences in curriculum and changing technologies, and with so much going on, we really need to have that support from not just a formal mentor that a school board may or may not assign to us, but also from our peers, so that we can actually mentor each other and be there for each other. It's a stressful profession in education, and I would argue that that's always been true. But it's our friends and our colleagues that make it a wonderful profession and get us through those challenging times. And I have a little example about that in my in the book. I tell a number of stories, as does my co-author Lana, and we tell a number of stories from our own experience. And one of my stories, which is not in the book, which is why I thought I'd share it tonight, because nothing worse than buying a book and then finding you heard it all in the presentation, is that during my first week of teaching in the elementary division, I was at a brand new school, never taught elementary before, come from the Canadian Forces Language School. It was 1 week to the day, Tuesday, September the 11th, 2001, and the planes hit the Twin Towers in New York City, and the towers came down. The elementary school that I was in, I had a grade 2 class, and it was a military community nearby. So a lot of those little children were wondering, were their parents who were serving military members, were they going to be going to war? What did this mean for them? And as teachers, I don't think there was any one of us who was prepared, me least of all, being new to primary, new to elementary teaching. But the only way we got through that was by really pulling together. And we really decided that we had to not just have children cope with that, but we need to have children understand what was happening and how they could impact that, how they could actually make a difference. And so we talked a lot about being peacekeepers at home, and then transferring that to being peacekeepers in the classroom, and being peacekeepers in the playground, and being peacemakers in the community. And we did a lot of work on social justice issues and about restorative justice, and even in the youngest grades. So by the end of the year, as a team, we had managed to do some outstanding work with those kids that each of us individually would have probably found quite challenging to do. And one of my favorite stories, which is in the book, is there's a little fellow, at the end of the year, they had asked me to bring my class to sing for the parents at the volunteer appreciation tea. And so I had the kids sing One Small Voice Can Teach the World a Song, which seemed really appropriate. And afterwards, the principal said, okay, kids, what did you learn in Mrs. Vetter's class this year? And I'm thinking, anyway, so one kid puts me and says, I learned to read. And that's great. And I learned pluses, and I'm thinking, I should have taught mathematical terminology a little bit better, but nevertheless, it was good. He learned math. And then one little fellow put up his hand and said, I learned I can make the world a better place. And oh my goodness, like all the parents were just like, they were awestruck, and I could have run up and hugged that child, which I didn't because it wasn't allowed. But nevertheless, that's the kind of work that you can do when you mentor each other, when you have that opportunity to do things that you might not have had a chance to do on your own. And so I think particularly as new teachers, or even as experienced teachers who are facing new situations, new curriculum, new technologies, more than anything, we really need each other. So, we've talked about the fact that a mentoring partnership is valuable, but really, what is a mentoring partnership, and why is that really valuable for you? Well, for me, a mentor creates an open and inclusive environment that encourages a mentee to demonstrate the best of their professional self, to take calculated risks in practice, and to become the professional self that they aspire to be. And, that can be challenging, and particularly in the early years of teaching, that can be really challenging to be your best professional self when a lot of times you're just sort of trying to get it all organized and hold it all together. But when you're part of a relationship, a mentoring partnership, where you can, call on somebody else to give you ideas, when you're feeling down, they can, make you feel more enthusiastic and nurture you along, when they can encourage you to take risks in your practice, or maybe when you have something that you think you're going to do and you think it's a brilliant idea and you share it with your mentoring partner and they say, did you really think about this or that before you undertake that? And so having that partner there is really more than just a mentoring partner, but it's a lifeline. And oftentimes we think of mentors as somebody who is older and somebody who is wiser and has a lot more experience. That's not necessarily so. A mentor can be anybody. And when I was in my first year at that school I was telling you about, there was another first year teacher there at the same time. And we became friends. It was 20 years ago. We became friends, not social friends. We didn't hang out on weekends or get together with our families, but we became professional friends. And we mentored each other through so many different things. And even to this day, we still stay in touch. She's now a principal, and I've been at the university for many years, but we haven't lost touch. And we still, communicate on Facebook and run ideas by each other from time to time. And it was such a rewarding relationship. And it was because of her, a lot of times, that I had the courage to put my ideas into practice. It was because of her then that sometimes, when I was feeling really discouraged, she would be the one that would keep me on track. And one of the ideas that people have often about mentors is that a mentor is a model, that, you model something for somebody. And this happens a lot of times in classrooms with teacher candidates and more experienced teachers. The teacher models something, and then the teacher candidate is supposed to, sort of mimic it or reproduce it. And in that way, the teacher candidate almost becomes in some ways, a copy of the mentor teacher. But in essence, the role of the mentor teacher is not a model, but it's a mentor who will offer an invitation to an inclusive and safe and welcoming physical and virtual and or intellectual space where both the mentor and the mentee or co-mentors can thrive, explore new ways to enhance their practice, and develop their teaching experience together. And the difference between that and modeling, I'll share a little story with you that this one is in the book. That same first year when I was in the school, and I had come with years of experience as a language teacher, but no experience in the primary grades. But I had lots of ideas about what I wanted, and I had a classroom where I had an environmental print wall, and I had all the kids sitting in groups and talking with each other, and we had a book club, and these were little kids, and but we had all this thing, and so the classroom was always a really vibrant place. And it was interesting, Amanda, you'll love this story. One day I was absent, and the next day I came back, and somebody else in the school said to me, "You had a great substitute teacher yesterday. So I walked by your classroom and you could have heard a pin drop." And I thought, oh dear, you can't hear a pin drop when I'm in there, because the kids are talking about what they're doing and what they're reading and, what they're actively engaged in. But anyways, I had a colleague at the time who was, much more experienced, had over 25 years experience in elementary education and in literacy. And so she came to my classroom, and that's why I have this little graphic at the bottom there of the little owl with the pointer. And she said to me, "I don't know what it is you're doing in there, but obviously this is not going to work." And she said, "This is how you teach young children to read." And she wrote a sentence on the board, "I see and then she had a blank. And she had magnets, and she had like a picture of a ball, and she had a picture of a book, and whatever. And she said, "You get your pointer and you point on the blackboard. Go, I see and then the kids answer whatever they see in the magnet." And she said, "And if they don't do it, you just, you hit the board harder with your pointer." And I thought, oh, okay. And, I said, "Well, thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it." And she left, and I felt really awkward. I didn't know, how to handle that. And I just realized that wasn't me. That's not the kind of teacher that I wanted to be, and it's not the kind of practice that I wanted to undertake in my classroom. And so, I just kind of went on with what I was doing after some serious reflection, because I didn't just want to throw away her advice. Anyway, so she came back about a week or two later, and it was after school, and she stood at my door and she said, "You obviously didn't listen to a word I said." She said, "I came by your classroom again, and I could see those children were still talking. They're sitting in their groups. They should be sitting on the floor, on the carpet in front, with, watching you do." And I didn't really know what to say. And I just said, "Well, I'm really sorry, but you and I are different teachers, and I can't teach that way. It's not me, and I don't think it ever will be. And I really appreciate it. And I want you to know that I thought carefully about what you said, but I just felt that it wasn't me, and perhaps we could just agree to disagree." And at that point, and this part's not in the book, she said, "We will not agree to disagree." And she got very angry. And I know you're waiting to hear the part where I come and say this wonderfully eloquent and articulate response, but I didn't. I burst into tears and ran into the bathroom crying. But anyway, I've grown since then. So, but it was just a really awkward experience. But the point being is that she wanted me to be her, and I can't be her, and you can't be me, and I can't be you. We all need to be our most authentic selves as teachers. And what we need, therefore, is a mentor who respects that in us and invites us to be who we are, and allows us to present our own ideas and can give us feedback on them, can share them, can discuss them, but still allow us to be our best self. And so I have a couple of ideas here. At the end of, I just have 3 slides. At the end of each one of my slides, I have 2 little things that you might want to think about. We call them mentoring moves in our book. There's 29 of them. And these are short, quick things that you can do with a partner, with another colleague. Most of the 29 are easily applicable to doing with your students as well. You can actually do them in your classroom. But the first one is called walk and talk. Because a lot of times, if you just sort of go walking with somebody, you're not making that direct eye contact as you're walking side by side. It's kind of like they always say you should talk to your teenage kids about behavior issues in the car because you don't have to make eye contact. But, you walk and talk. And I mean, one thing teachers need, particularly in these trying times, is just a breather. Out of the school, 20 minutes at lunch, a couple of loops around the block, walk and talk. And our mentoring move provides some basically sentence starters, some conversation openers, things to really help you talk about your practice, talk about what you're doing, what you wish you were doing, what you love about what you're doing, where you want to go, what some of the challenges are that you're having, and gives you the opportunity just to listen to each other and to get some feedback from each other. The next one is called positivity as practice. And that's a wonderful way, particularly when you're working with a colleague or a friend as a mentor. Sometimes they ask you for feedback and you think, gee, I don't want to offend you. I don't want to, say the wrong thing. And I know you're trying hard, but hey, I know you need some feedback here. So in the positivity as practice, we've got some questions that if your colleague asks you for feedback that you can ask. When during that lesson did you feel those kids really got it? When did you feel best about the lesson? What do you think the kids were thinking when they were doing that final activity? Where did you see some challenges that they might be having? If you had just one thing that you had to do to improve that lesson, what might that one thing be? And if there was one thing about that lesson that you really didn't want to give up and that you would even incorporate into other lessons, then what might that be? And so those types of sort of easy sentence starters, again, that kind of a conversation can be had on a lunch break and a walk around the block, online or after school. So all of the things in the book are things that you can easily do with each other. The next thing I wanted to talk to you about is reciprocal learning. And reciprocal learning is a really important part of mentoring. We think of again, as I mentioned earlier, the traditional mentor who's older and wiser and has all this experience, and the new person who's kind of jumping in. But with this type of mentoring that we're talking about, a healthy mentoring relationship committed to reciprocal learning, characterized by an openness to trial and error, to trying out new approaches, and to honest discussion about the outcomes. And both the mentor and the mentee, or the co-mentors, are encouraged to perceive the mentoring process as a journey or an adventure that can uncover surprising new ways of being in the classroom. And one of the surprising new ways of being in a classroom for me that kind of highlights this reciprocal learning. So I was teaching a grade 5 class. I had to teach the science, and I was teaching electricity. And I thought, I don't really know a lot about electricity. And I was, about to do what we all do as teachers when there's something in the curriculum that we're not 100%, we cram on it and we try to figure out the best we can, and we go in front of the kids and we do the best we can. And then I thought about it and I thought, that's just not going to work. And so I thought about, this whole idea of reciprocal learning. And grade 5 kids know a lot about a lot. And so I took this idea into my classroom. I went to school the next day with my hair blower. I plugged it in the portable, and I fluffed my hair with my hair blower. And the kids were like, "What's she doing?" And Mrs. Sutter, what are you doing? I said, I'm styling my hair with my hair dryer. And I said, what I'm trying to demonstrate to you is all I know about electricity. I know that if I plug in my hair blower in this wall in my portable, my hair dryer is going to operate. How the electricity gets here from Niagara Falls, I'm not quite so clear on. So this is something we're going to learn together. And then I told them, one thing I really do know how to do is I know how to learn. I know how to be a good learner. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to be the lead learner, and together we're going to learn about electricity. And it was the most fascinating unit because I did learn about things. And there was kids in that class that could make a battery out of a potato that I never quite mastered. And there was kids who had interesting conversations at the dinner table about environmentalism with their parents. We talked about what it was very important at that time was called NIMBY, not in my backyard. You know, I didn't want hydro towers or wind towers or, you know, all different things going on. We talked all about all of those kinds of things. And so we all learned so much. And I use that as an example, not because I want you as teachers to abandon learning anything to teach your kids, but just the opposite, to prove to you that you can be the lead learner. And you can be the lead learner in a mentoring partnership. You and your mentoring partner might have very different skill sets. And one of you might bring a deeper knowledge of mathematics. Another might bring a deeper knowledge of technology. One of you might have more experience working with children with special needs. Another, you know, so there's so many things that you can bring together and share with each other, taking turns to lead the learning if you have more expertise, or just to learn together if you don't. And teaching and mentoring in collaboration values the different perspectives of both the mentors or co-mentors, if we want to call them that, with overall common objectives and shared understanding. And that works great if you're working with someone who's on the same page as you, or perhaps as a friend or a colleague, someone that you've worked with before, studied with at the university. But sometimes the reality is that the mentors that we get assigned to us, whether they be through a university practicum or whether it's in a formal mentoring program that's established by a school board, those people are not necessarily on the same page as we are. And so how do you go about doing that collaborative piece where we're respecting our different perspectives, but still sharing common objectives and understanding? And so two of our mentoring moves, one is called Third Point, and that's a really easy thing to do. And again, you can do this with kids in your classroom. You find a resource. It can be a book, it can be a website, it can be a TED Talk, it can be absolutely anything that hits a topic of interest to both of you, or hits a topic of interest for your whole class. And you use that as a starting point. And so from that point, you assess the material, you evaluate. It's a wonderful exercise in critical thinking if you're doing it with a classroom full of students, particularly in the intermediate and senior grades, but it works great in the junior grades as well. But you start with something concrete, whether it be a book, a resource, a movie, whatever it is, and use that as a launch point where you can then have a more comfortable conversation about your perspectives and what those different perspectives are. And then the next activity this is one of my favorite ones. I absolutely love this. It's called The Important Thing. And I got this from a book by Margaret Wise Brown, and it's called The Important Book. It was written in 1949. It's a picture book. And normally you would look through that and you would think you would only use that in the primary grades. But I have used this in every grade. I have used it with university students. I've used it doing workshops on mentoring for commercial and industrial clients. It's an absolutely amazing strategy. And basically what you do is you take a page of the book, and if you Google on YouTube later on, or you can email me for the link, I can send you, there's a read aloud of the book on YouTube. But basically each page just describes the important thing about something quite normal. An apple, one is rain, grass, a spoon. The little, you can't really see it as well on the screen here, but this little, the one of the spoon is here. And it starts by saying the important thing about whatever it is, an apple, a spoon, is, and then it goes on to list several other different points or attributes, characteristics of, for example, a spoon. And then it comes back to in a circle by saying, but the important thing about a spoon is, and that circles back to the first thing. And when I do this with university students, one of the ones I often do is community, because we want our teacher candidates to understand the importance of knowing the community, knowing where those kids come from, knowing the neighborhoods. And so then we say the important thing about community is, and a group of 5 teacher candidates will come up with, and I've done this even with elementary kids as well, they'll come up with all sorts of different ideas. And then their job is to sort of synthesize them and to talk about them and to sort of prioritize them and to come up with some that they can all agree on, at least somewhat, and then to draft their own statement that follows the template from the book. The important thing about, for example, community is, You know, it's my home. It's comprised of different people. It is meaningful to everyone that's part of it, and it goes on. And then, you know, but the important thing about community is that it's my home. And so that's a wonderful strategy for mentors who are new at working together, or perhaps have different perspectives, to begin to come together and to work on it. So if you're a teacher candidate working with a mentor teacher, you might look at something that you're looking at, whether it might be, you know, teaching mathematics or the use of manipulatives or whatever. You know, the important thing about using manipulatives is, and then kind of work your way through and sort of come to some common understandings about the use of manipulatives. So this is my final slide about building a mentoring community. I mean, we've been talking about mentoring partnerships, basically, and we've been talking about two people. So oftentimes two colleagues in a school, or two colleagues at different schools, or even teacher candidates often come together in their first year of teaching, although they may be spread across a province, across the country, or some even internationally. They may form a mentoring community where they stick together and they still share their ideas. They're a sounding board for each other. And I would really strongly encourage you to do that, because really the most valuable thing you can do for yourself as a teacher and for your students is to ensure your own wellness. And your wellness depends on having the right support mechanisms in place. And so this is what I really encourage all of you to do. And when you think about a mentoring community, for some people, it's a little scary. You know, there's a little bit of anxiety about that, because they think, oh my goodness, you know, you're asking me to open my classroom door, you know, whether it be virtually or physically, and invite people in to look at my practice. I'm deprivatizing everything that goes on in my classroom. And, you know, what are people going to think? And you know, that's true. But when you get to do it with a group of people that you built your community with, it's an outstanding and most rewarding way to get new ideas, new thinking, and to develop new ways of being in the classroom. And that's what we really all want as teachers. 25 years from now, you don't want to be that teacher that has 1 year of experience 25 times over. You want to be that teacher that has 25 rich and wonderful years of teaching experience. And a lot of that happens because we share our stories. And that's one of the reasons why our book is full of stories of our experiences, because storytelling helps to share learning. It helps to build knowledge. It helps to develop relationship. And it also helps to challenge some of the beliefs that we hold when we hear someone else's story. It gives us a new perspective. It gives us a new lens on what it is that we think we know. A lot of times misunderstandings come from what we think we know, not necessarily from something that is accurate. And then the final part of that is that the support of the community allows you to shift from a what experience, like, oh, what is this lesson I'm teaching? What is this curriculum? What is this topic? To what if thinking, like, what if we did this? What if we changed this idea? What if we took this learning outdoors? What if we took this learning online? What if we turned this learning into a creative experience? What if we allowed our students to dance their understandings rather than to write it down? What if we allowed them to draw it or to create a collage? And those are all the really exciting and fun parts. And so the two mentoring moves that go with this is, one is storytelling, which really we have some prompts for you to help you along with that. But the last one that I'll mention tonight of the 29th is called What I Bring. And this is another one of my favorites. And you can do it with grade 2s, and you can do it with university students. You can do it with your colleagues. That you just get a template of a tree, and everybody either physically with a sticky note, different colored sticky notes, writes what they bring to the partnership, to the class, to the project, to whatever it is you're talking about. So for grade 2 kids, they might bring fun. They might bring kindness. They might bring, whatever little grade 2s think about is important. They might bring, I'm a good printer, or I'm a good reader. And in a colleague situation, you might say, well, I'm a great collaborator. I'm a good communicator. I have good tech skills. I'm enthusiastic. I'm organized, and whatever. And you put all of your skills, whether you do it with the text box on a Google Doc or whether you put sticky notes on a chart paper. And when you're finished, you have a tree full of all of these multicolored leaves with all the gifts that each person in the group or each person in the mentoring community brings to the partnership. And it then helps us to really understand what we can do more together, because we know what everybody has to give. And it also helps us to think about what we really need in building our partnership when we look at the gifts that people have and what it is that they bring to us. And so finally, I just wanted to let you know that we are a mentoring community now. We've started this together, and I hope that we can continue the conversation. I have 2 email addresses. You can reach me at the university, dianev@yorku.ca. I didn't know there was only one Diane V at York University, but I guess there is, and that's me, so it's easy to find me. Or I have a personal email, vettereducation@gmail.com. I do have a Twitter, and I don't tweet that often because I get kind of busy doing other things, and I don't always get around to it. But I love to follow. I follow people who were in my classes years ago and colleagues, and I learned so much. Talk about reciprocal learning. I learned so much from just looking at your Twitter feeds and all of the interesting things that you post there and that we can share. So please get in touch. We are definitely a mentoring community now. I kind of feel I invited you into my living room here tonight. I didn't get a chance to offer you a cup of tea or a glass of wine, but maybe the next time we meet, we can do so in person. Thank you.
Diane, thank you. That was great. As you were talking, I was sort of reflecting on everything that we've been talking tonight about building community, about relationships and stories, and the importance of mentors, and almost a couple of people who were mentors for me. But you didn't really mention this, but with all the new folks coming into the profession, you talked about the formal piece, but I'd say the mentors that I sort of reflect on, they're the ones that came out of the community, and I didn't even know they were my mentors for a while. And so is there any sort of things that you sort of reflect on, as I'm coming into the profession? Is it just keeping an open mind and talking to everyone, or do you find people that you connect with? Is there any kind of sort of sense of what you would say to someone coming in that, hey, be aware of this, and there are people out there? Like, I was a physics teacher, and one of them was the foods teacher that became a mentor just because of the way they did things. And it was like, I would have never picked that in a million years, but that's how it kind of worked out. So it's a pretty powerful tool.
Well, it really is, Lionel. And I think just open-mindedness is the biggest key. I think a lot of times we just presume, oh, somebody doesn't want to hear about my problems, or I'm the only one who's experiencing this. And that's not so. I mean, we're all experiencing these things. And even 25 years down the road, they introduce a new system in the school, they introduce new technologies, and there are teachers there that have got lots of experience, but all of a sudden they're going like, oh my goodness, what's this? And they're looking for someone to help them. And a new teacher candidate coming into the school who knows how to use a smartboard, who is familiar with Google Docs and Google Classroom. I mean, you just wouldn't believe at the university the number of teachers that we had were begging for teacher candidates with this virtual schooling who could bring that knowledge and that understanding. And I mean, even myself, I've been teaching for so many years, but this year I'm teaching it online at the university, and it was a huge learning curve for me, and I really had to rely on other colleagues. So, just be open-minded and warm and welcoming. If it's the physical setting, go to the staff room and get to know people. Share your thoughts. Don't be reticent. Don't feel that nobody's interested. Everybody's interested. And one thing I love about teachers is teachers really love each other. They love teaching. They love to support each other. They love to be part of learning community. So don't ever hesitate to make a suggestion. And if somebody says, no, well, I'm really sorry, I'm just so busy, no problem. I mean, just maybe start with one little thing. Ask them just, hey, I had an idea and I'm looking for somebody to, try it out with. Are you interested?
Yeah. No, and maybe just as sort of a final thought here, Rachel just dropped a really good point in, and there may not be an answer to this because this whole pandemic is so new to us, but she's asking, any suggestions on how you do that in a virtual world? Especially, I've just come out, I've got my B.Ed, so I'm no longer in a school. Are there ways outside the practicum to do that, or is it just so new we don't? It's hard at this particular moment.
Well, it is a little bit more challenging now that everything's online. But it doesn't necessarily just need to be someone in your school community. You know, I mean, it can be, you can have a Twitter group. Amanda was mentioning earlier, you know, that there are groups that you can join online. I know TVO in Ontario has a wonderful website where you can jump on, and there's all sorts of people in mentoring groups with common interests that you can join into those mentoring groups. You can join, you know, associations, like, for example, if you're a math teacher, or even if you're a primary teacher who just happens to be interested in math, the Ontario Association for Mathematics Education, get yourself a membership there. They're always doing things, running interesting things. All of the different subject associations, if you're in secondary, have meetings and groups, and you meet the nicest people. And once conferences start happening again and people start going to these things, you know, people that you've talked to online, you can meet them face to face. And so there's lots of opportunities. Again, you just have to put yourself out there. And be confident that, yes, people do want to get to know you, and people do want to help you, and want you to help them.
I think that's a great way to end our session today, is that sort of shout out for professional organizations of an area that you're interested in your teaching, because you're absolutely right. They're a great group of people who are passionate about whatever the professional association is about, and they would welcome you with open arms, I'm sure, as to work with you, both as a colleague, as a mentor, or just for professional learning. So really, really, really good point. So Diane, thank you very much for taking the time this evening to allow us into your living room. Even though we didn't get tea, that'll be when we can do the face-to-face. It was great to have you here. So on behalf of everyone, thank you so much for taking the time this evening to share your thoughts. And for those of you that you notice on the, we also have an offer from Pembroke. If you click on that, that'll take you right to Diane's book. And if you use the code BTC21, there's also a $5 off your purchase there. So as we come to an end here this evening, Amanda and Diane, thanks so much for taking the time. I know on behalf of everyone, it was great. We're hearing comments like, looking forward to the strategies. Thanks for sharing the ideas. That's what this is all about. And we can't be face to face, so this is the next best thing. And you made that come alive today. So thank you very much. And to everyone, thank you. Have a great evening, and we'll see you next time. Take care.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.